It was a bright Saturday afternoon. The sun was out, the sky was clear, and the local park was filled with the sounds of kids laughing and parents chatting. Near the swing set, a little girl with curly hair and bright eyes was running around, chasing bubbles and giggling loudly. Her dad, a tall man with tattoos on both arms and a soft smile, was the one blowing the bubbles. He was wearing a simple black t-shirt and jeans, nothing unusual for a weekend. His tattoos were bold and visible, covering most of his arms, and he had a calm but confident presence. You could tell just by looking at him with his daughter that he was the kind of dad who gave his full attention when he was with his child. He wasn't scrolling his phone, he wasn't distracted, he was fully present. He pushed her on the swing, helped her climb the slide, and caught her when she ran full speed into his arms, laughing. On a nearby bench, a woman in her early 50s sat with her small dog, watching the park around her. She had short blonde hair, wore sunglasses even though she sat in the shade, and sipped slowly from a metal water bottle. She kept glancing over at the man and his daughter. At first she just seemed curious, but then her expression started to change. Her eyebrows pulled together. She stared longer than necessary. Every time the little girl cried out, even in excitement. The woman flinched and looked over sharply. Then the little girl tripped on the grass and let out a quick whine, nothing serious. Her dad picked her up, dusted off her knees, kissed her forehead, and they moved on to the next game. The woman's eyes narrowed. She looked down at her dog, then back at the man. She tapped her phone. She looked again. Then with a long breath, she stood up, walked a few steps away, and made a call. "Yes, hello, I'm at Ridgeway Park. I think I'm seeing something that doesn't look right. There's a man here covered in tattoos, and I'm not sure if the little girl with him is safe. No, I didn't talk to them. But it just doesn't look right. He looks rough. Please just send someone to check." She hung up, looking satisfied. Then she sat back down and waited. Unaware of what was coming, the father was now crouched near a small flower patch, showing his daughter a ladybug crawling on a leaf. She squealed with joy, poking at it gently. The dad just smiled and kept pointing out other tiny bugs. They looked peaceful, just like any other family enjoying a day at the park. But less than 15 minutes later, 2 police cars pulled up to the edge of the park. Their lights weren't flashing, but the presence was obvious. People in the park turned to look. The dad stood up slowly, unsure of what was happening. His daughter looked up at him, confused. The officers began walking in his direction, serious expressions on their faces. "Excuse me, sir," one of them said. "Can we speak with you for a moment?" The dad looked surprised but nodded. "Sure, what's going on?" "We got a call about a possible child safety concern." "This your daughter?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Yes, of course. This is my daughter." The little girl immediately wrapped her arms around his leg. She didn't know what was happening, but she could feel the tension. Her dad knelt down and gently whispered, "It's okay, I'm right here." The officers asked for his ID. He pulled it out of his back pocket and handed it over. They asked if he had any proof that the girl was his. He calmly opened his phone, showed them pictures, lots of them. Birthday parties, bedtime selfies, park days, just like this one. He had a video of them dancing together that morning in the kitchen, her in pajamas, him holding a spatula like a microphone. Still, the officers asked to talk to the girl. One of them knelt down and said, "Hey, sweetie, can you tell me your name?" She answered softly, "And who is this man with you?" She answered again, "My daddy." They looked at each other. It was clear nothing was wrong. But the situation had already created a scene. A few parents nearby had started whispering, looking on with confusion. One woman walking by with her toddler had seen the whole thing from the beginning and spoke up. "I've been here since they arrived. That man has done nothing but play with his daughter. She's clearly safe and happy. There's no reason for this." The officers turned around. "Thank you, ma'am. We just have to follow up when we get a call." The dad stood quietly, holding his daughter's hand, trying to stay calm. But his jaw was tight. His eyes, though kind, held the weight of something deeper, something tired. Then one of the officers pointed toward the bench. "She's the one who called," he said, nodding at the woman with the dog. The dad turned to look. The woman met his eyes for just a second, then looked away. She stood up, walked over, and tried to explain herself. "I just thought, she didn't look like she was yours," she said. "She was crying, and you have, all those tattoos." The man didn't raise his voice. He didn't curse. He just looked at her and said, "So you didn't talk to me? You didn't ask her if she was okay? You just called the cops because I don't look like the kind of dad you expected?" The woman opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. The dad picked up his daughter, who by now had her arms wrapped tightly around his neck, and turned back to the officers. "Am I free to go?" "Yes, sir," one of them said, a little more softly this time. "Sorry for the trouble." He nodded, walked slowly toward a nearby bench, and sat down, holding his daughter close. She was quiet now, resting her head on his shoulder. The playground sounds had returned, but there was a different energy in the air. A few parents glanced his way with apologetic expressions. One or two nodded in support. The woman with the dog stayed on the far side of the park, leash in hand, not making eye contact with anyone anymore. Back on the bench, the father kissed the top of his daughter's head and whispered, "You're safe, baby girl. Don't let anybody make you feel less." She nodded, still not fully understanding what had happened, but trusting him completely. The park carried on. Kids kept playing, but something had shifted. Something had been seen, and it wouldn't be forgotten. What had started as a peaceful day at the park had turned into a moment that would change more than just one afternoon. It was only the beginning. The police officers had just finished talking with the man and his daughter when the woman who had called them finally decided to come forward. The sun was starting to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park, but the tension in the air was thick. Everyone nearby could feel it. The woman with the dog walked slowly toward the officers and the man, clutching her purse tightly. Her steps seemed hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she should really be here. When she stopped just a few feet away, she looked at the man directly. I was just worried," she said softly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a nervous edge. "I thought the little girl might be in danger. She was crying, and you have all those tattoos. It just looked strange." The man looked at her calmly. His daughter was still sitting quietly on the bench beside him, clutching a small stuffed animal. He sighed quietly, trying not to let anger take over his voice. "You never asked me if she was okay. You didn't talk to me or her. You just made a call because of how I look." There was silence for a moment. The officers glanced between the two adults, not wanting to make the situation worse but needing to understand what happened. The woman shifted on her feet, avoiding eye contact. "I was scared," she admitted. "I see so many stories on the news about kids being taken, and I didn't want to be the person who didn't act." The man nodded slowly. "I get that. Protecting children is important. But you could have asked me first. You could have said hello or said something. Instead, you made me feel like a criminal in front of my daughter. That's not right." Around them, some of the people who had gathered began to murmur quietly. A few heads nodded in agreement. One woman nearby spoke up, her voice kind but firm. "We all want to keep kids safe, but we can't let fear make us treat people unfairly." The woman with the dog looked at the crowd and then back at the man. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said quietly. "I just didn't know what else to do." The man smiled gently, though there was still sadness in his eyes. "I know you didn't, but it's important to think about how your actions affect others. My daughter is my whole world. When you made that call, you made her scared. She didn't understand why strangers came to talk to us like that." At that moment, one of the officers stepped forward. "Ma'am, we understand you were worried. But next time, please try to speak with the people involved before calling us. Sometimes things look different when you get to know the full story." The woman nodded, her shoulders slumping. "I will," she said softly. The officers then turned to the man again. "Sir, we're sorry for any distress this caused you and your daughter. We just have to respond when a call like this comes in." The man nodded. "I understand, but I hope this doesn't happen again. It's hurtful." One of the officers gave a small smile. "We'll do our best. You're free to go now." As the officers walked back to their cars, the man took his daughter's hand and stood up slowly. She looked up at him, still holding tight. He smiled down at her. "Let's go get some ice cream," he said softly. She smiled back, the tension in her little body easing just a bit. Together they walked toward the exit of the park, leaving behind the curious stares and whispered conversations. But even as they left, the feeling in the air was different. The day, which had started out so simple and joyful, had become a quiet lesson for everyone who had watched. The woman with the dog sat back down on her bench, her head low. She stared at her feet, thinking about what had happened. She didn't expect the man to speak to her the way he did, so calm, so understanding. She realized that fear can make people act without thinking. But it can also hurt others deeply. She wished she could take back the call. She wished she had the courage to just say hello, to ask questions instead of making assumptions. A few minutes later, a jogger who had been passing by earlier approached the man. She was a middle-aged woman with a warm smile and kind eyes. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry you had to go through that. I saw everything and you were just being a great dad." The man looked surprised but grateful. "Thank you. It means a lot," the jogger nodded. "It's sad that people judge by looks. But don't let it stop you. Keep being the dad you are." He smiled again, feeling a little lighter. As they walked out of the park, father and daughter, their day had changed, not just by the police visit, but by the look of fear in one person's eyes and the quiet courage it took to stand strong. For the daughter, the world was still a place of swings and laughter, of ice cream and bubble chasing. But for the father, it was a reminder of something bigger, that sometimes, even simple moments can become tests of patience, love, and strength. And as the sun set behind the trees, the man promised himself he would keep showing his daughter the love and protection she deserved, no matter what anyone else thought or said. Because that day, in the park, more than just a phone call had been made. A message had been sent. It was a message about trust, respect, and the need to see beyond what's on the surface. And that message would stay with him, just as much as the warm hand in his own. After the police left the park, the quiet buzz of whispers stayed in the air. People who had seen what happened talked softly among themselves. Some shook their heads, others looked thoughtful. The incident was over, but its impact was just beginning. The man sat on a bench holding his daughter close. She was tired now, her small head resting on his chest. He gently stroked her hair, feeling the softness, the warmth. For a moment, the sounds of children playing and birds singing felt far away, like a distant memory. He thought about what had just happened, how a simple day in the park, full of joy, had suddenly turned into something strange and painful. It wasn't just the police coming over. It was the feeling that he was being watched, judged, treated like a threat. It made him sad. Not just for himself, but for his daughter. How was she supposed to understand that sometimes people see her dad and feel afraid? How could he explain that love and care don't come with certain colors on your skin or shapes on your arms? Later that day, the man sat down at his kitchen table, his daughter asleep upstairs. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling through his pictures. There were so many: birthday parties, school plays, sleepy mornings, messy dinners. Every photo told a story of family, of love, of ordinary life. He paused on one picture, him and his daughter laughing, faces covered in ice cream, eyes bright with happiness. He showed it to his wife on a video call. "See this?" he said softly. "This is what my life really looks like." She smiled back. "You're an amazing dad. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." They talked for a while, sharing the story of the day. She listened carefully, then said, "Maybe it's time to speak up. Share this story. Let people know how it feels." He wasn't sure at first. Sharing something so personal could bring more attention, and not always the good kind. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that this story wasn't just his. It belonged to many parents who face the same kind of suspicion, the same kind of judgment. The next morning, he decided to write a post. Not a long speech or angry rant, but a simple message about what happened, about being a dad, about being seen as a threat just because of his skin and tattoos. He wrote slowly, choosing each word carefully. He wanted people to feel what he felt, to understand without anger, to see without fear. When he finished, he posted it online. The response was immediate. Messages started pouring in, some from people he didn't know, others from old friends. They shared their own stories of being judged unfairly. They thanked him for speaking out. They offered support, but not everyone was kind. Some wrote harsh comments saying he was overreacting or making a big deal out of nothing. Others questioned his parenting or made rude remarks about his tattoos. It was hard to read. But he reminded himself of the people who reached out with kindness, the ones who believed him, the ones who wanted change. Days later, a local community center invited him to speak at an event about parenting and race. He agreed. He wanted to use his experience to help others understand the challenges many families face. On the day of the event, the room was filled with people from all backgrounds: parents, teachers, neighbors. He stood at the front, nervous but determined. He told his story: the park, the call, the police, the woman's fear. He spoke about the pain of being judged and the strength it took to keep loving openly, despite it all. He looked into the crowd and saw nods, tears, thoughtful faces. Some people whispered thank you after he finished. Others asked questions, wanting to learn how to be better neighbors, better friends. One woman shared her own story, how she had called the police once because she was scared, but now she understood how her fear had hurt someone innocent. She apologized publicly, her voice shaking. It was a powerful moment. After the event, a few reporters approached him, interested in sharing his story with a wider audience. He agreed, wanting to bring attention to the issue without anger or blame, just honesty and hope. The story soon appeared in local news, online articles, and social media. More people saw it. More people talked about it. He received invitations to speak at schools, community groups, and parenting classes. He became a quiet voice for change, not just for himself but for families everywhere. Through it all, his daughter grew up safe and loved. He taught her about kindness and strength, about standing tall even when the world looked at you with doubt. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, she looked up at him and said, "Daddy, I love you." He smiled and held her close. "I love you too, more than anything." In that moment, all the fear, all the pain felt smaller. Because love was stronger, because family was what mattered most, and no one could take that away. After the story was shared online and in the news, things started to change, but not all at once, and not in ways the man expected. The post he wrote about the day at the park, the police, and the woman who called had touched many hearts. People began to talk openly about how fear and judgment can hurt families and communities. At first, the man was surprised by the attention. He had only wanted to share his experience, hoping others might understand what it felt like to be unfairly judged. But now messages from strangers poured in, some full of support, some full of questions, and some simply sharing their own stories. Mothers, fathers, teachers, and neighbors reached out. They thanked him for speaking up. They said his words helped them see things differently. One day, a local community leader invited him to a meeting about how to make the town safer and more welcoming for all families. At the meeting, people shared their thoughts and feelings. Some spoke honestly about their fears. Others admitted they had made quick judgments before, without realizing the harm. The man listened carefully, realizing that the problem wasn't just about one call or one day in the park. It was bigger, about how people see each other, about trust, about fear of the unknown. At that meeting, a woman who had been quiet for most of the evening finally spoke up. She said, "I'm the woman who called the police that day. I want to say I'm sorry. I was scared, but I see now that I acted too quickly. I didn't stop to ask or listen. I regret that." Her voice was soft, but the room was silent as everyone absorbed her words. The man looked at her and nodded. "Thank you for saying that. It takes courage." That moment felt like a small step toward healing. It reminded everyone that people can learn and change when they are willing to listen. The woman with the dog started attending meetings and community discussions about bias and respect. She read books, listened to talks, and tried to understand what her fear had caused. It wasn't easy. Sometimes she felt guilty, other times confused, but she wanted to do better. The man, for his part, didn't want to hold on to anger. He believed in forgiveness, not just for others, but for himself. He wanted to focus on helping people see each other as neighbors and friends, not threats. Meanwhile, the video of the park incident had been shared on social media by a bystander who had recorded part of the conversation between the man and the woman. It quickly went viral, sparking conversations far beyond the small town. The video showed the calm strength of the man, the fear and regret in the woman's face, and the confused little girl caught in the middle. Many people were moved by the video. Some posted messages of support. Others shared their own experiences with similar situations. Some people started hashtag campaigns to raise awareness about racial bias and the importance of understanding. But not all responses were positive. The man saw hurtful comments online too. People who accused him of playing the victim or making trouble. He knew social media could be a harsh place, but he tried to focus on the good, the support, the voices calling for change. One evening, as the man scrolled through messages on his phone, his daughter tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, can we go to the park again tomorrow?" she asked. He smiled, thinking about how much the park had come to mean. It was where they had laughed, cried, and learned important lessons. "Of course, sweetie," he said. "We'll go as often as you want." The next day at the park, something different was happening. People greeted each other with smiles. Parents who had once whispered about the man and his daughter now said hello openly. Children played together without hesitation. A group of neighbors had started a small event, a picnic for families to come together and share stories. The man and his daughter joined in. They ate sandwiches, played games, and talked with new friends. The woman who had called the police also came. She brought cookies as a peace offering. She approached the man cautiously. "I want to say again, I'm sorry," she said, "and thank you for showing me what kindness really looks like." He accepted her apology with a warm smile. "We all make mistakes. What matters is that we try to do better." Their conversation was quiet, but it spoke volumes. It was a reminder that healing takes time and effort, that respect and understanding are built one moment at a time. Over the following weeks, the man began working with local schools to talk about bias and respect. He shared his story with students and teachers, helping them see how assumptions can hurt real people. Parents thanked him for bringing a difficult conversation into the open. Teachers said his words helped create safer spaces for children. In one school assembly, a young girl stood up and said, "I didn't realize how my words and actions could make someone feel unsafe. Thank you for teaching me." The man felt hopeful. Change was slow, but it was happening. Despite the progress, the man knew there was still work to do. He thought about the next generation, his daughter and all the children growing up in a world where fear and judgment too often get in the way. He wanted to make sure that when she grew up, she would live in a place where families like theirs were accepted and celebrated, where dads with tattoos could play in the park without suspicion, where children could feel safe and loved. One afternoon, as the man and his daughter walked home from the park, she stopped and looked up at him. "Daddy, why did the lady call the police?" He took a deep breath. Sometimes people get scared when they don't understand something. They make guesses instead of asking questions. But that's why it's important to be kind and patient, so we can help each other feel safe. She nodded thoughtfully. "I want everyone to be friends," he smiled. "Me too, baby. Me too." That night, as he tucked his daughter into bed, he whispered a promise to himself. He would keep sharing their story. He would keep speaking out for fairness. And he would keep loving his daughter with all his heart, no matter what, because love, understanding, and respect, and those were the things that could change the world. Time passed, and the man's life slowly began to settle into a new rhythm. The days when fear and judgment had hung over him like a shadow were becoming fewer. The moments filled with kindness, understanding, and community were growing more frequent. It was not an easy journey, but it was one filled with hope. He often thought back to that day in the park, the day that started with a phone call and ended with so many lessons. It was a day that changed him and the people around him in ways he never imagined. One morning, as he was preparing breakfast for his daughter, his phone rang. It was an invitation from a nearby city to speak at a conference about community and understanding. The event would bring together people from different backgrounds, parents, teachers, police officers, and local leaders, all eager to listen and learn. He wasn't sure if he was ready. Public speaking was not something he sought out. But then he thought about his daughter and the future he wanted for her. He wanted to use his voice to help make the world a better place, not just for his family, but for all families like his. When the day of the conference arrived, he stood in front of a large crowd feeling nervous but determined. He told the story once again, the fear in the woman's eyes, the police officers arriving, his daughter's confusion, and the kindness that had followed. But this time, he also spoke about what came after, about the power of forgiveness, about how the community had come together, about the importance of seeing people beyond appearances. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of strangers who were listening, many with tears in their eyes, others nodding slowly. After he finished, the room erupted in applause. People came forward to thank him, to share their own stories, and to ask how they could help make change. He realized then that his experience was not just about one moment in a park. It was about a movement toward understanding and respect. Back home, his daughter was growing quickly. She was curious about everything, the world around her, the people she met, the stories she heard. She loved playing in the park, climbing the swings, and chasing bubbles in the sunlight. One afternoon, as they sat together watching the clouds, she asked him, "Daddy, why do some people get scared of others?" He smiled softly. "Sometimes people are afraid because they don't know each other. They see things that seem different and their minds imagine things that aren't true." She thought for a moment. "But that's not fair, is it?" "No, baby," he said gently. "It's not fair at all. That's why it's so important to be kind, to listen, and to get to know people before making guesses." She hugged him tight. "I want to be kind. I want everyone to be friends." He hugged her back, feeling a deep sense of pride and love. That's the best thing you can do. As time went on, the man found new ways to help his community. He worked with local groups to organize family events, to create safe spaces for open conversations, and to teach children about kindness and respect. He became a quiet leader, someone who didn't seek the spotlight, but whose words and actions made a difference. His story was shared in classrooms, community centers, and even on the news. It inspired others to speak up, to stand against fear and judgment, and to build bridges where walls once stood. One evening, after a long day, he sat with his daughter on the porch. The stars were bright above them, and the air was cool and peaceful. She looked up at him and said, "Daddy, I'm glad you told our story." He smiled. "Me too, sweetheart." "Me too," she yawned, sleepy now, and he carried her inside to bed. As he tucked her in, he whispered a promise to always protect her, to always teach her, and to always believe in the good in people, because in the end, that's what mattered most. Their journey had started with fear and misunderstanding, but it had grown into something beautiful, a story of love, courage, and hope. And it was a story that would live on, not just in their hearts, but in the hearts of everyone willing to listen and to change. Life, as it often does, kept moving forward. The man and his daughter continued to live their days surrounded by small moments of joy, learning, and connection. But the experience from that day in the park was never far from his mind. It had changed him deeply, shaped how he saw the world and his place in it. More than anything, he wanted his daughter to grow up in a world where she wouldn't have to face the fear and suspicion that had touched their lives. He dreamed of a future where people looked beyond appearances and saw each other's hearts. One morning, as they sat together eating breakfast, the daughter asked a question that caught him by surprise. "Daddy," she said, "why do some people judge others by how they look?" He looked at her thoughtful face and took a slow breath. "Sometimes people judge because they are scared. They don't understand what they see, so their minds fill in stories that might not be true. It's easier for them to believe those stories than to get to know the person." She nodded slowly, her small hands playing with her spoon. "But that's not nice." "No, it's not. It's hurtful. But that's why we have to be kind and patient. We have to help others see the truth, not just what their fears tell them." She smiled, and he knew that she understood, even if the world around them sometimes did not. As the days went by, the man found himself reflecting more on the power of stories, how one story could change minds, open hearts, and create connections. His own story had reached many people, but there were still so many voices unheard. He began visiting local schools more often, talking with children about kindness and respect. He shared simple lessons about judging people by their actions, not their looks. About understanding differences as something to celebrate, not fear. In one classroom, a little boy raised his hand and asked, "Why do some people think people with tattoos are bad?" The man smiled gently. "Tattoos are just pictures on skin. They don't tell you who someone really is inside. It's important to remember that." The children listened closely and many nodded. After one talk, a teacher approached him. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Your story helps us teach children about kindness in a real way." He felt grateful. Every conversation like this was a small victory, a step toward change. Meanwhile, the community continued to grow closer. The man worked with neighbors to organize more family events in the park. They started a weekly story hour, where parents and children came together to share books, experiences, and hopes for a better world. The woman who had called the police that day also joined these gatherings. She had become a regular, volunteering and learning alongside everyone else. She even spoke publicly at one event about the importance of overcoming fear and building trust. Their friendship wasn't perfect. There were moments of awkwardness and honest talks about mistakes and growth, but it was real, and that made all the difference. One afternoon, as they all sat under the big oak tree in the park, the daughter ran up to her dad holding a crayon drawing. "Look, Daddy, I made a picture of our family and all our friends, she said excitedly. He took the colorful paper and smiled. The drawing showed a circle of people holding hands, smiling faces of all colors, shapes, and sizes. That's beautiful, he said. It's just like the world I want you to grow up in. She nodded happily and ran off to play. The man watched her, feeling a deep sense of hope. Yes, the world had its problems. Fear and judgment still existed. But love, kindness, and understanding were stronger. He thought about the people who had supported him, the neighbors who had opened their hearts, and the community that was learning to see each other as more than first impressions. One evening, after a long day of meetings and talks, he sat on his porch with his daughter asleep inside. The stars twinkled above, and the quiet night wrapped around them like a gentle blanket. He pulled out his phone and looked at the messages he still received. Stories from others who had faced fear and suspicion. Thanks for his courage in sharing his story. Offers to help build a better future. He realized then that the journey was far from over. There was still work to do, still barriers to break down, still hearts to open. But he was not alone. He was part of a growing movement, a community bound by a shared hope for respect and understanding, and he would keep telling their story for his daughter, for all the children who deserve to play freely in parks without fear, or every family trying to live their lives with dignity and love, because stories have power. They can change minds, heal wounds, and bring people together, and sometimes the smallest moments, like a call to the police on a sunny day, can become the start of something much bigger, something that reaches far beyond the park bench, the tattoos, or the fears, something that touches the heart of what it means to be human.